Now, let's move on to another quantity, which is essentially we call the intensity of the electromagnetic field or the electromagnetic wave. Sorry, either works, whichever you want to use. Okay, how do you define intensity? Intensity. Do you know how do you define intensity?
From the
Essentially, it's just
intensity.
talking about how many. If you're talking about light, so it's talking about how many photons are going, or how less photons are going. Right? More intensity is the more number of photons that are going. So let's say there is an area that we take. Let's say area we're taking A, and there is some electromagnetic wave. So some light is crossing through this area in different directions. So there are many sources, and there in from this area, there's some amount of light that is going through. So intensity is essentially defined as the number of crossing uh, the number of crossing light particles in the direction perpendicular. So I'll write perpendicular as I'll just draw perpendicular. Okay, I'm using short forms, but I hope you understand this. In the direction perpendicular to the surface A. Okay, it's the number of light particles that are perpendicular to the surface A per unit time and per unit area.
So what is it after number of
Uh,
focus
number
length? Sorry.
number of crossing, as in the number of particles which are essentially crossing this area. That's essentially what I'm trying to say. The number of crossing light particles in the direction perpendicular to the surface A per unit time per unit area is known as intensity. So well, from this definition, it's essentially uh, okay. So from this definition, essentially, it's essentially easy to see that this is just the energy, whatever that the energy that is passing through this area per unit area and per unit time. Correct. So let's say we are taking an interval delta t that we're going to observe. We already know that A is the area of this whole spiel. So energy we've already figured out is the energy density of the electromagnetic field. Yes. Okay. So U is essentially the energy density, right? U is the energy density. It's given by 1 by 2 epsilon naught E naught squared, which is also equal to 1 by 2 mu naught B naught squared. You can use either of the formulas. Okay, so so this is energy density. Energy density we know is energy multiplied by the volume. We have area here, we don't have the volume here. So how do we figure out what the volume is? Let's see what happens. Energy density is energy per unit volume. Okay, let's think about a volume which looks really simple. Let's say your electromagnetic wave is going along this cylinder. Okay, so you've essentially there's a cylinder and you've you shined light at one end of this cylinder. So let's say the area of this is A. It's essentially analogous to the area A that we were taking in this kind of thing. So essentially, if now we're taking a circular area, then we are taking a rectangular area. But area is just area. It's just given by A quantity, and the remaining volume will essentially be the distance that this wave is traveling in time delta t. What is that time? What is that distance? It is the speed multiplied by the time, right? C delta t. Speed is equal to distance upon time. So distance is just equal to speed into the time. Lovely. So the volume of this whole thing is just A. The volume is just A times C delta T, right? So this implies what is the energy? Energy we need to calculate to essentially to feed into this formula here. So energy is the energy density U multiplied by the volume. Volume we figured out to be AC delta T. Okay, so this is the energy of an electromagnetic wave, of not the energy density, but the energy of the electromagnetic wave. Now, if you want to calculate intensity, what do we do? So intensity is just energy for unit area per unit time. Energy we figured out was what? Was U A C delta T divided by what is the area that we're talking about? Well, that's the area. That's essentially the area that we were talking about. A multiplied by the time delta T. The area cancels out and the delta T's cancel out. All you're left with is the energy density multiplied by C. So that's a very, very simple relation. If somebody asks you the intensity, that's for an electromagnetic wave. It's just the energy density, which is essentially equal to half epsilon naught E naught multiplied by C, or it's just half mu naught in the denominator, B naught multiplied by C. Does that make sense? It's a really simple derivation.
Yes, sir.
Lovely. We can think of another variable, another thing about the electromagnetic wave. We can think about the momentum of an electromagnetic wave. Now, how would you think about momentum of an electromagnetic wave? Well, we've already, if we actually think about it, electromagnetic waves are essentially massless because they're photons. They're just waves. They're not really matter that is traveling from point A to point B. It's just a wave that is traveling. It does have some energy density, yes, and it is traveling, but it does not have any mass. But since it does have energy density, we can actually talk about the momentum p of an electromagnetic wave, and we can say that the momentum of the electromagnetic wave is given by the energy density divided by the speed of light. It's just a direct formula. If we actually see the units, what should be the units of momentum? What should be the dimensions of momentum? Well, momentum is just mass into speed. So it's mass into speed, which is length, LT minus 1, correct? What is the units of the energy density? Any idea? So you have energy per unit volume. Energy is joules. Joules is what? Half mv square, let's say. So mass into v square. So L square T minus 2. So this is the energy per unit volume. L minus 3. So L minus 3, L minus 2 makes what? ML minus 1, T minus 2. So this is what the units of energy density is. What about the units of C? Well, this is length per unit time, and we're dividing. This should be L minus 2. Yes. Okay. So let's put this value here. So what is the division of these two? Well, this just gives you MLT minus 1. So essentially, you can see that the both of the units are equal. So momentum is just energy density divided by the speed of light. So if you're asked for the momentum of the electromagnetic wave, you can just calculate it by calculating the energy density and then dividing by the speed of light. So essentially, anything you need to calculate in this chapter, you'll first have to calculate the energy density, and from there you can calculate the intensity, and you can calculate the momentum, and you can calculate other things as you want. Okay, so let's try some questions. Um 2.25 into 10 to the minus 12. That's absolutely correct. Yes. What about the magnetic field? Use a calculator. Magnetic field will be the same. Absolutely. What about the electric field? What about the total field? Sorry. Total field is just the sum of the electric field and magnetic field, right? So it will just be 2.25 plus 2.25, which is the double of that. So I mean, 4.5 into 10 to the minus 12. Makes sense? What about the fourth part? See, fourth part, you're asked the amplitude of the magnetic field. So essentially, you're just asked B naught. And B naught and E naught has a very, very cute relation, right? We know that E naught is just C times B naught. So just put in the value and you'll get it. That should be fine. So what should B naught be? It should just be E naught divided by C. E naught is given to be 1, so it's 1 by 3 into 10 is power 8. So that's just 0.33 into 10 is power 8 minus 8 Tesla. That's the SI unit. So which is just 3.33 into 10 is power minus 9 Tesla. Does that make sense? Okay, not that question. Okay, so let's do this one. A laser beam. Okay, so what are you given? So always any question you see in front of you, always start with what is given. Second question, what is asked. These are the two questions that should be absolutely clear. After that, you can progress. So what is given? It's given that the intensity of whatever beam there is 22.5 into 10 to the power 14 watt per meter square. Find the amplitude of the electric and magnetic fields in the beam. Okay, we know that intensity, so we essentially need to find P naught and E naught. So what is intensity given by? Well, it's just the energy density multiplied by C. Energy density of what? Energy density of the whole electromagnetic wave. What is the energy density of the whole electromagnetic wave? Well, that's just half epsilon naught E naught squared, right? Or which is also equal to half mu naught epsilon naught. Sorry, B naught squared. Lovely. And we know the value of C, we know value of epsilon naught, we know the value of mu naught. Well, you can use all of that to essentially just plug in the values and to calculate all of this, right? So you can first plug in these values here and then calculate E naught because I know C, I know epsilon naught. You can calculate E naught and then you know mu naught, you know C and you know I. So you can calculate B naught also from there. So that's how you'll progress. Okay, I'll do this for epsilon E naught. You can do it for B naught on your own. I is given to be 2.5 into 10 to the power 14. You have a half here, epsilon naught here. Epsilon naught is given to be 8.85 into 10 to the power minus, what was it? 10 to the power minus 12. Yes. Into E naught squared multiplied by C, which is 3 into 10 to the power 8. Okay, so first of all, when you're doing these calculations, to take care of the powers, you have a minus 12 here, you have a 14 here, and you have an 8 here. Well, this 8 is cancels out with this minus 12 to give you a minus 4, and this minus 4 goes on the other side to give you a 14 plus 4, which is 18. So you have a 10 to the power 18 here multiplied by, so you have 2.5 here. So, okay, so let's just write this out. 2.5 divided by, sorry, multiplied by 2 because of this 2 here. 8.85 into 3. Is anything else left? No, it's just E naught squared. So this is equal to, you get a 5 in the numerator and you can divide by the 5.85. So this changes it to 1.387 35.7 1.77. There's a 3 here and then square 8. So what would that give me? So 1.77 into 3 should be around what? Should be around 5.1, 5.1 something. And you're dividing 1 by 5.1. So that should be around what, 0.2, yeah, 0.19. Let's say 0.19. So essentially you get 0.19 into 10 to the power 8. So which is 1.9 into 10 to the power 7. What are the units? What are the units of the what are the units of E naught? Volt per meter, right? And similarly, you can put in the value of mu naught and calculate P naught. So now let's move on to the next topic of sorts, which is essentially the whole spectrum that we want. So somebody uses the word spectrum in front of it. What essentially they mean is that there is a range. And when one is talking about the electromagnetic spectrum, they mean that there is a range in the electromagnetic waves. There are a range of electromagnetic waves. What is that range based on? Well, it can be based on either you can you can you can base it on the frequency, or you can base it on the wavelength, lambda. So either way, we know that frequency and lambda, both of them are related by the speed of light, in the sense that speed of light is just lambda times nu. So here, from here, you can, if you know nu, you can calculate lambda, and if you know lambda, you can calculate nu, which is the frequency. Let's go from the end of the smallest frequency or the largest lambda. So let's talk about frequency of 10 hertz. 10 hertz means um, 10 hertz means 10 cycles per second, essentially. Cycles per second. So if it's going up and down, so it's going up and down one full cycle, it's completing 10 times in 1 second. That's what 10 here means. That will be equivalent to around 10 to the power 7 meters. So it will be 10 to the power 7 meter in length. This is in meter, and the above is in cycles per second. Mm, from here to about 10 to the power minus 2, let's draw this 10 to the power 6, 10 to the power 5, 10 to the power 4, 10 to the power 3, 10 to the power 2, 10 to the power 1. You have 10 to the power 0, you have 10 to the power minus 1, 10 to the power minus 2, 10 to the power minus 3, 10 to the power minus 4, 10 to the power minus 5, 10 to the power minus 6, 10 to the power minus 7, 10 to the power minus 8, 10 to the power minus 9, 10 to the power minus 10, 10 to the power minus 11, 10 to the power minus 12, 10 to the power minus 13, and 10 to the power minus 14. At 10 to the minus 14 is essentially, it's not, obviously it's not the smallest wavelength one can see, but it is a really really small wavelength. If you're talking about 10 to the power minus 14 meter of wavelength, you're essentially talking about a wave, an electromagnetic wave, whose wavelength is as small as the size of the proton, which is essentially very very small, or nucleus, not essentially the proton is 10 to the power minus 15, but the nucleus is 10 to the power minus 14 of a reasonably heavy element. Yeah, I just realized my video is off. Nice. And similarly, you can go up in the table in the frequency. So you get 10 to the power 2 here, you get 10 to the power 3 here, you get 10 to the power 4 here, 10 to the power 5, 10 to the power 6, 10 to the power 7, 10 to the power 8, 10 to the power 9, 10 to the power 10, 10 to the power 11, 10 to the power 12, 10 to the power 13, 10 to the power 14, 10 to the power 15, 10 to the power 16, 10 to the power 17, 10 to the power 18, 10 to the power 19, 10 to the power 20, 10 to the power 21, 10 to the power 22. So essentially on the other end, we have 10 to the power 22 cycle. So it's essentially it's going up and down to 10 to the power 22 times in 1 second. That's a humongous amount of frequency that one has, and we know that frequency is essentially related to the energy. So the more energy that that particular electromagnetic wave have. So where does this go from? So from around 10 to 10 power 6, around this point here, from here to here. The region, this is called long radio waves. This is long radio waves from here to here. So around 10 per 7 meters in wavelength. So that's very, very long. So about, what's that? That's 1,000 kilometers. 1,000 kilometers of wavelength to about 100 meters of wavelength, or about a meter of wavelength. Um, such an electromagnetic wave which has this range of frequency and wavelength are called long radio waves. Then from 10 past 6 to 7, 10 past 6 to 10 past 7 in frequency, or 10 past 2, so 100 meter to 10 meters, so 10 meters to about 100 meters, you call these waves as AM frequency. EM frequency waves. So if you turn on your radio and if you listen to AM, I don't know if you guys have AM anymore. In my childhood, we used to have AMs as well, other than FMs. So that these are essentially the frequencies that those people used. The modern frequency of radio, so FM radios and television, actually goes from 10 to the power 7 to 10 to the power 9. So this is essentially the spectrum that one uses for televisions and radios. So FM radios, sorry, frequency modulated radios. So it's 10 to the power 7 to 10 to the power 9 frequency, or about 10 centimeters to 10 meters is the wavelength of, of this TV radio waves. Okay, what else is there? From 10 to the power, from 10 to the power 9 to 10 to the power 12. What do you have? This is called, what is called microwaves. So near microwave oven, these are essentially the frequency of waves that one use. So microwaves. So if you, why is this particular wave so useful? Well, one realize it is because this frequency essentially somewhat matches the frequency at which the water molecules also vibrate, and hence you can cause resonance in these molecules if you apply similar frequency, and hence all the energy gets stored inside the water molecule and it gets heated up, and that's the principle of your microwave ovens that one uses. So as we call all of these long radio waves, we'll call all of these short radio waves. Short radio waves include essentially the AM frequency, the TV and FM frequency, and what we call as microwaves. Okay, if we go further, well, where is have we reached the I limit yet? 10 is per minus 5 minus 6. No, it's here. Okay, yes. So from here to here, essentially what we have is the infrared. This is the infrared spectrum, from 10 to the power 6 to minus 7. Yeah, around -6. So so actually infrared actually goes up till here, and from here to here, 10 to the power 13 to 10 to the power 14, or around 10 to the power -6. Okay, around here you have the visible range. So all the colors that you see belong to this tiny strip here in the electromagnetic spectrum. You have all your VIBGYOR here. You have violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, and red. All the colors of the rainbow are essentially in this frequency range, this tiny frequency range here. And then if we go even past that, if we increase the energy, well, what we have is the ultraviolet rays, which essentially go up to 10 to the power minus 8. So around here, these are what are called UV rays. Uh, these are called UV rays. And if we go further, we have what are called X-rays, and X-rays go up to 10 to the power minus 12. So essentially, this range, this whole range from here to here, are what are called X-rays. X-rays, I'm sure you've come across whenever if you've gone to the doctor or one of your family members. I'm sure you guys have heard about X-rays. Broken bones, one can see how broken bones are inside the human body because X-ray essentially can penetrate the tissue and it cannot penetrate the bone. So you can see just the bone and how exactly the bone is if you have an image of the X-ray. Then further ahead, actually, X-ray and the gamma rays, the next one that we have, overlap a bit, and they overlap it from 10 to the minus 10 here. So this to however high energy you can go. So forever, essentially, all these rays are what are called gamma rays. Okay. So this is essentially what the electromagnetic spectrum looks like. Okay, but what we can also do is we can list down what kind of sources produce these things. As I said, K and gamma. Some of them we did already talk about, but not all of them. So let's take one by one. What about long radio waves, LRW? Well, these are essentially produced by accelerated motion of charges in conducting wire or oscillating circuit. So in any wire, typical wire, whatever the motion of the charges is, obviously it's getting accelerated. There's a potential difference. So there's a current and these charges are being accelerated. Yes, there is a force, so hence they're being accelerated. So the kind of waves that these oscillations will produce will essentially be in the range of the long radio waves, and that is essentially how these radio waves are produced. So essentially accelerated motion of charges in conducting wires or oscillating circuits. Oscillating circuits. Lovely. Then this actually is more or less the same for the short radio waves also, except up till microwaves. Microwaves have a different way of the how we produce microwaves in let's say your microwave oven. How it is done is as follows: microwaves. Um, so these are made by oscillating currents. So they were just LRWs were just made of conducting current. These are made of oscillating currents. Oscillating currents in special vacuum tubes. In special vacuum tubes like magnetrons and gun diodes. GUNN uh, diodes. So this is how essentially one produces microwaves in your microwave oven, and this goes on until infrared, which is essentially here, this particular range here. How is infrared produced? I'll just start writing here. Okay. Well, infrared is produced by us, by all living things, by most non-living things as well. Infrared radiation is essentially just the heat that we're giving out, that is in the range of this infrared radiation. So essentially, you can just say hot bodies and molecules will produce infrared rays. What about the visible? The visible spectrum, which is this tiny portion here, well, these are produced from atomic processes. When you have an electron which is essentially in higher orbit, and it comes down to a lower orbit, releasing energy in the form of a photon, that frequency, so essentially frequency related to the difference in the energy levels of let's say a hydrogen atom, will come in the range of visible light. So essentially, you can say that radiated by excited atoms. Okay, then we have ultraviolet. Okay, let's move on. And now we have ultraviolet. How is ultraviolet produced? Well, ultraviolet is mostly produced by high voltage gas discharge tubes. So these are special instruments that uh, where one has to build, and first discovered in the 1800, long time ago. So you need a really high voltage. When I say high voltage, I mean thousands of volt. Um, high voltage gas discharge tubes, uh, or I mean, we know the sun also produces a lot of UV radiation, and hence one needs to use all the skin protection as much as they can to not get cancer. Then we have X-rays. How are X-rays produced? Well, X-rays, now notice that we're going to very high energetic processes. So it has to be even more dramatic than what is happening inside the sun. So essentially, this is X-rays are produced because of sudden deceleration, deceleration um, of fast moving electrons um, by a metal target. Okay, so if you have sudden deceleration of a fast moving electron, you will get X-rays. We know that deceleration and acceleration of charges produce electromagnetic waves. So it's not very surprising that this does happen. What about gamma rays or gamma? Gamma rays. Well, gamma rays are essentially, as I said, produced in nuclear reactions, so radioactive nuclei. Radioactive nuclei and nuclear reactions. So, I mean, the best example that we have is carbon, not carbon, cobalt 60, from what I remember. Yes, cobalt 60. It's essentially, if you have cobalt 60, it just produces gamma rays just sitting there at a very rapid pace. Lovely. So that's essentially the electromagnetic spectrum. That's how things are arranged, and that's how things are produced. Okay, let's move ahead, and let's come to one of the last topics that we have in this whole spiel of in this whole chapter, which is essentially the Earth's atmosphere. Why is the Earth's atmosphere important to studying electromagnetic waves? Well, for multiple reasons. A, because well, light is electromagnetic wave and it comes from the sun and it has to come through the atmosphere before reaching us. So it might be important for us to study because our life is based on the energy that is coming from the sun. Second of all, we can use it in transmission, and we can use it in communication really, really well, as we'll see really, really soon. So how does the Earth's atmosphere look like? Do you know how thick the Earth's atmosphere is? So let's say this is the Earth. So let's say the atmosphere is here. So what's essentially the thickness of the atmosphere from the surface to the maximum height? Well, we know that it goes up to a distance of 400 kilometers. So the Earth's atmosphere is essentially 400 kilometer thick, and obviously it's divided into multiple layers. So let's say this is all the 400 kilometer. 400 kilometer might sound a lot, but then you also have to realize that the radius of Earth is 6,400 kilometers. So I mean, if you actually draw it to scale, then if this is the Earth, then it will be really, 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 really close to it. It won't actually be this thick, but for representation sake, let's see let's see what this Earth's atmosphere is made of. Well, it's well, broadly speaking, obviously one can make many more distinctions when it comes to these individual distinctions, but broadly speaking, one can divide the Earth's atmosphere into four parts. The first part being the closest to us, the one we live in personally, which is the troposphere. The troposphere. The troposphere goes up to a point. This point has a length of 12 kilometers. So essentially, it goes up to 12 kilometers. 12 kilometers being the height of approximately how high all aeroplanes essentially fly. Airplanes are actually lower than that, but high altitude airplanes and highest peak, the Mount Everest is about 9 point something kilometers. So about that order of magnitude. So that's how high the troposphere is, and what happens to the temperature in this sphere? Well, what happens is that the temperature essentially goes down from 290 Kelvin at the at the, at the ground, 290 Kelvin being what 27 degrees Celsius. So on the ground is 27 degrees Celsius. That's what we, sorry, 17 degrees Celsius. That is what we assume the room temperature in cold places to be read. So 290 Kelvin at the surface, up to 220 Kelvin at so around 3 degrees Celsius at the height of the troposphere, at the top of the troposphere, which essentially we call the tropopause. So the last line of this 12-kilometer line, essentially the end of the troposphere, is called the tropopause. Then after that we have the stratosphere, which extends from 12 kilometers to about 50 kilometers. So it's here. So this distance is essentially from 12 to 50 kilometers. That would be around what, 38 kilometers thick. So it's about 38 kilometers thick. So from 12 kilometers to 50 kilometers. It's 38-kilometer thick. Um, what about the temperature? Well, the temperature, interestingly, in this particular layer of uh, in this particular layer of the atmosphere, actually goes up. It stops going down by the end of the troposphere and then starts going up again. And it goes up to 280 Kelvin again. So it goes down from 220 Kelvin, goes up to 280 Kelvin again, which is around what, 7 degrees. Yeah, 7 degrees Celsius. Lovely. Yes. This is where the stratosphere is where we essentially find a concentration of what is called the ozone molecule, the O3 molecule, or we call it the ozone molecule. And this is actually near the starting of the stratosphere, so near the 12-kilometer mark, about some meters thick. It's actually not very thick. It's some meters thick, but there's this whole region of where we find a higher concentration of the ozone gas, which is the O3 molecule gas, and this is what we call the ozone layer. So this tiny thing here, from 12 kilometers up to, let's say, 13 kilometers, this tiny thing here inside the stratosphere is what is the ozone layer, which helps us a lot, obviously. I mean, so why is ozone layer so important? Because I mean, all the UV radiation that come in strike the ozone molecule and converts it to oxygen and oxygen molecule and oxygen ion, which essentially tags along with some other oxygen molecule, makes an ozone gas again. So it does not allow the UV radiation to pass through it because it's absorbing. It's the right frequency for it to absorb. Um, that's why it's a very important thing for any life survival on any single planet. Lovely. Let's move further up. Let's reach the mesosphere. Oh, by the way, the end of the stratosphere is called a stratopause because obviously it's called a stratopause. So you had up till, this is what, 12 kilometers, then you have 50 kilometers, um, then now you have the mesosphere, which goes up to 80 kilometers. Yes, it goes up to 80 kilometers. So this goes from 50 kilometers up to 80 kilometers. And interestingly, the temperature here. So here, the temperature from this layer to this layer was actually decreasing, right? So if you plot the temperature, it was initially decreasing, then it started increasing, then it starts decreasing again. So it was decreasing here, it was increasing here, then it starts decreasing here again. And it goes from 280 Kelvin, which was at the stratopause, which is the end of the stratosphere, up to 180 Kelvin. So it actually goes lower than what it was at the end of the first of the troposphere. And obviously, the end of the mesosphere is called the mesopause because we're naming things like that now. And finally, from 80 kilometers up till the end is what we call the ionosphere. Now, this ionosphere is actually the most important from our perspective. Obviously, from life's perspective, there are other other layers which are more important. Let's just think about the ozone layer. But from our perspective, when we're talking about electromagnetic waves, ionosphere is the most important because it's essentially where you find a lot of collection of charged particles. So essentially, since there is the ozone layer is below it, so all the frequencies from the sun are essentially hitting this layer, and whatever molecules there are, whatever atoms there are, when they're hit with these range of frequencies, they get ionized. and hence it's called the ionosphere, because most of the particles that there are there, the atoms and the molecules, are essentially ionized. And what happens to the temperature? This is temperature and this is, let's say, height. What happens to the temperature again? Well, the temperature, interestingly, starts rising again, and it just keeps on rising. It makes sense. It keeps on rising, right? Because I mean, you're moving towards the sun, so it's going to be hotter out there, and it actually goes up quite a lot. It goes up from okay, first of all, it range. It's from 60 kilometers up to your end, which is 400 kilometers, and the temperature goes on to, and the temperature goes on from 180 Kelvin, which was at the end of the mesopause, and it goes up to 700 Kelvin by the end of the ionosphere itself. So it's really, really hot out there. Yeah. Now this ionosphere, obviously, because it's like really, really thick, from 80 kilometers to 400 kilometers. That's like 320 kilometers worth of things one can quantify even further, and hence people go out and do that as well. So even the ionosphere is divided into three further parts, which are essentially called, from lower to upper, the thermosphere. First there comes the thermosphere. Then there's something what was discovered by Mr. Kenley. Is there a double L? Yes, there's a double L. Kenley Heaviside. Kenley Heaviside layer. So this is essentially named after Mr. Kenley Heaviside, and yeah, it's the middle part of the whole ionosphere. And at the end, the most outer regions of our atmosphere are what are called uh, the Appleton layer. So these are just names. I mean, one can ask you these names. The thermosphere, if you want to know, it goes up to 110 kilometers, and the Kelly Heaviside, Kenley Heaviside layer essentially goes up to 250 kilometers. This particular layer, this Kenley Heaviside layer, it's very interesting because what essentially happens is the whole ionosphere, when these molecules get ionized, this middle layer, this middle Kelly Heaviside layer, is essentially the layer where all the electrons essentially bunch up, concentrate. So essentially, this is also called the layer of electrons. This is also called the layer of electrons. These are essentially the electrons that have escaped from their native molecules, or from their original molecules, when being hit by solar radiation, and hence they've accumulated together, being free. It's like free slaves, or whatever. Just one last point I want to make on this is that the ionosphere, since we already talked it, that there's this layer of a lot of electrons and ionized gas essentially present here. So what essentially we can use this as, since there are a lot of electrons, we can think of the topmost layer as a conductor. Because what is a conductor? Conductor is essentially anything which has a bunch of free electrons, right? Since this particular layer has a bunch of free electrons, it acts like a conductor. So for example, if you're on the earth, if you're standing here, and if you want to send a message at this point, so what you can do is you can use the fact that there is a conductor above you. You can send it the signal, and the signal will be reflected by the conductor, and you can send it on the other side of the planet as well. And that's why this ionosphere is so important for electromagnetic waves, because it essentially behaves like a mirror for electromagnetic waves, and we can use that for speed of light communication. We do use it for speed of light communication, for satellites, and for all things that we love and care.